Going to open up the chat here. We're ready to go live. Opening up the chat. Hi, welcome to your live session with Sondra Shannon, CEO of Gatemaster Technology. And I've got a special guest on this live today, Vincent Mavente, and we're going to talk to him about the future of guest services and striking a balance between technology and personalization. And while we wait for some of you to join, I'm going to welcome Vincent to the show. Hi, Vincent.
Hi, Sondra. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing great. It's a nice sunny day here in Georgia today.
Oh, nice. That's a lot better than here in Denver. We've been in the negative 10s,
Oh, it's
which is
cold.
not normal for us, but the sun's out today, which is really nice. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know that, our audience here on this live show and broadcast that we have is really interested in hearing about how the future of guest services, the balance between technology and personalization that you've come on to talk about today, how that is impacting the attractions industry and all the wonderful and great things that you're doing over at Herschend Family Entertainment to help facilitate that. So before we get started, I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind just given kind of the background of who you are, and then if you'll answer one question for me, because this is what I think is always really fun, how long you've been working in the attraction space. So you'll let us know that too. That's always a fun question because I have a saying, once you're an attractions person, you're always an attraction person. And even when I connect with people who have left the industry, their heart's still with it. So, I think we're very lucky to be able to work in a space like this. So Vincent, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I have been working in the contact center world, my goodness, almost 30 years now, and in various locations. I have been in the attraction business now for only 2 years. I came to Herschend to help them kind of streamline technology, understand what the contact center world needed to be, how you integrate that with other parts of the organization so that we have a more streamlined approach. We not only have the attractions, we obviously have the resorts involved too. So we have to kind of marry those technologies and make sure that we're doing everything so that everybody has eyes on everything that's going on and there's no real blind holes. That's an important piece. So I spent my 2 years here bringing in new contact center technology, new CRM tools, and a few other things. So it's been a fun 2 years.
That's awesome. I love that. And how are you liking attractions? Isn't it a fun space to be in?
It is. I had been with the company about 3 months, and I was texting with some old employees that used to work for me in my previous life. That it was March the 18th, I think it was, and I was working, but I was standing at the opening at Silver Dollar City. I said, "So this is my new job. I now stand here and just see what's going on. I'm learning the attraction business, and it's been pretty much the same ever since. Anytime." I always joke and say, anytime you kind of lose focus on what you're doing, it's, run to one of the properties and spend a little time there, and you kind of remember why. Oh yeah, that's why it's important. We get those interactions correct.
I love that. I love that because my personal experience too is that if I need to fill my cup again, I just take my family to an attraction, not only to do the research that I need to do, but also just to have that experience because so many of us are in this industry because I mean, myself, I'm in the industry because some of my greatest memories are with my family was going to
Mhm.
attractions. I grew up in Southern California, so Disneyland, and my mom would wait 8 hours to get us the best seat for the parade and the shows, spending that time together and the time and the investment the families make to visit us at these attractions, I think is where, we come in, but also really helping with our, appreciate you being here because our mission at
Mhm.
Gatemaster is to help attractions massively succeed. And to me, that means helping them understand these nuances like what you're talking about, maybe we don't talk about very often in the attractions industry, and that is the balance between technology and personalization. And how do we still maintain that personalized hospitality while integrating and collaborating with technology? So I'm just going to jump right in with some of these questions that I have for you, if that's okay.
That's great.
So the use of technology and guest interactions. So my first question for you, Vincent, is, you've mentioned to Tiffany, who's also on my team. She's actually the superstar on the team. I say that all the time on this show, but you've
Mhm.
mentioned to her that providing the right balance between technology without abandoning personal service is a delicate choice for attraction businesses. And I'm curious, how do you approach this challenge at Herschend Family Entertainment?
Yeah, I think the first step for us, and it's part of what we put in here a little over a year ago with some of our technology, has been just the ability to listen to the guest and find out what the balance is that they prefer, and it's different for different guests. So we've taken the approach of offering them kind of the pathway that they want, and I think that's important. In a lot of our, especially our phone conversations, so I would refer to it as the pre-visit phone call, whether I'm just buying a pass or I'm booking a room and getting a pass, whatever I'm doing. In that instance, the agent becomes a concierge for them in a lot of ways. And we stress that with the agent. Take the time, educate them on the property. If they have questions about property or access or how that pass is going to work or what level of pass they need to get access to whatever attraction they're looking for, that it's worth spending the time, because one of the things we found is the more thorough we are with those communications and that interaction, the higher the NPS score when that person actually comes to property, right? We set those right expectations.
Yeah.
And this is what you got to do. The worst thing you can have is an unpleasant surprise when somebody gets on property. So that's really kind of the focus of how we determine what that balance is. It's really always going to be driven by what the guest wants, and what they're looking for.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious, when we're talking, you mentioned that, you have the
Mhm.
service agents who are speaking with the guest and trying to give them as much information as possible. And I completely agree with you. I mean, we see that in even our data is that customers are much more satisfied when they know what to expect. They know how to make the most of their experience, because as we discussed,
Mhm.
the investment that they're making to be there, part of the value is that they have the hospitality, the good hospitality, the welcoming, and then also understanding
Mhm.
what's all available to them. Are there any technological tools that are out there that can also assist service agents with this task that you mentioned of making sure that the guest has all the information that they need?
Yeah, we have in place and are putting in place. First was obviously the technology that we can obviously measure the work that our agents are doing, which is exceedingly important to understand what the satisfaction is with that interaction. But it's also presenting them with information. So one of the pieces that we've recently decided to move forward with was doing something with our knowledge base that will, to a degree, automate that and get us the ability to present the information to an agent as rapidly as they can, so that they're not looking sore through anything. Nobody wants a long interaction if they're on the phone, right? Nobody
Yeah.
wants that. I don't call a contact center and say, gee, I hope this lasts for 20 minutes.
Right.
So we're aware of that, conscious of that, and the faster. It can be as simple as somebody calling us to find out, what the property hours are for that day. As soon as they ask that question, that information's, when we get this fully invested and in, it will automatically populate for the agent to just read out to them. That goes hand in hand, obviously, with any use of artificial intelligence and automatically giving the guest that piece. We are, stay away from that to a degree. We'll meter that out as we go down the road and see if there's an appetite from our guest audience. But right now, it's the interaction with the agents what we focus on. And the key to that is just continually understanding and making sure that we are, and that all of our information, whether it's web information, our information we're giving over the phone, is coming from the single source. So that's been a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's You know what? That's so important that all of the information, the voice and the information comes from that single source. And that actually leads me to my next question, which is, and I appreciate, I was going to ask you about the artificial intelligence and the bots and how, maybe you might be leveraging some of that technology. We see some of that starting to appear more and more in this industry.
Mhm.
I know here at Gatemaster, we've been leveraging different parts of that as well in our business, still trying to keep that personalization with our attraction partners, but also making sure that we're always meeting them where
Yeah.
they need us. And sometimes those, there are personalities that that we're touching that are prefer that type of interaction.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what are some of the pitfalls that an attraction can avoid when implementing new technologies in the guest service arena, or maybe an experience that you've had with that, or a challenge that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think the biggest pitfall is simply just not taking the time to understand what your audience wants and what they need. I've like I said earlier, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I learned a long time ago that I can measure my satisfaction all I want to by listening to a phone call and say, yeah, that went really well. I don't really measure it until I find out what the caller thought of that phone call. And it's the same thing with the use of technology. We have opened our technology to go from just doing calls to allowing people to email or chat with us, and then get into those pieces so that way we can do it. Personally, I have my own customer service concern. I'm having to have one right now with a very large hospitality organization where I'm trying to cancel a reservation and I'm trying to reach them to cancel it. And there is no chat option. There's no anything. There's an 800 number.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I prefer to chat because you know what? I can do it on my time. I can do it while I'm working. I can do it while I'm watching TV at night. I can do it when I want to do it. So we are very conscious of that. The other piece is just, especially on the contact center side, not as much on property. On property, it's I wouldn't say simpler, but it's definitely more direct and right there. In the contact center environment, it's you can get a little stuck on how many of the interactions you complete, how fast you're doing them, what you're doing them, and you're not adding value. And that's the other pitfall we try to avoid, is making sure we're adding value to every conversation. That goes a long way. It's back to what we talked about, just setting those expectations, but really listening and understanding what the caller really wants. Sometimes they don't even know what they want. That's what we're here for, is to help them through that.
Yeah. And I'm curious because you mentioned that, one of the pitfalls that someone might encounter is not knowing what the guest wants. What are the ways that you discover that?
Yeah, we do it.
Someone?
Yeah, the easiest way that we did it was to flat out ask and do some polling, and we did that to find out, which we had to do it just to decide which avenue or channel we wanted to open first. Like, do we want to do email before we do chat? What do we want to do? And in our case, we got a clear answer that people prefer. We get it a lot anyway. We have a lot of forum activity on our website, which comes to us via email to work, and there's a lot of volume there. And now that volume gets connected with phone calls and everything else. So when guest A calls us, we can see that they've already emailed us twice. We can see what they've done on social media. We can see all those pieces so that we now know, okay, this is what the issue is. I can see what's going on here, And then one of the things we'll evolve to at some point is taking a guest who's called us maybe 4 times within a 24-hour period and saying, okay, this call just needs to get escalated. There's something going on here that we're missing, and let's get it to the right resource. So that way, seamless to the guest, they know they're being taken care of.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Well, one of I just want to segment over to meeting the guest where they prefer. And we know in today's guests expect to be able to interact with businesses on their own terms, using their preferred channels of communication. I think you've mentioned quite a lot about how Herschend is meeting this expectation. Is there anything, I'm curious, is there anything that you see coming in addition to what we see today, with your expertise and, maybe ahead.
It falls into, from our perspective, is introducing the technology from our side, standing back, and then doing it. We have, obviously for obviously all of our properties, but especially with our two largest properties, which are Dollywood and Silver Dollar City, we focus on our phone applications for on-property experience, right? So there's a phone app, you go there, it's got all the information on it, and we'd like you to kind of do that piece. One of the things that we're looking to do and probably test out this summer will be, do we link a chat? Do we link a phone piece so that they can reach directly out to an agent that way? Sometimes you have a simple question, you can't find somebody on property to answer the question, but we might be able to answer it because we're very versed in what's going on in the property. We know what's going on real time in the property. So we have an idea of what that answer is. So if it's simple enough for us, I always like to say, if we could take the easy parts and take them away so that on property can deal with the harder questions, that's the right way to kind of move that integration, and I think that's a big part of it, so that the experience is what they want. If I could chat a question from my app of, I'm currently standing here, where do I find the nearest churro? And somebody on my team can look at it and go, oh, I got the park mark, it's right here. Just go over here, you can find it. That's a value added. So
Yeah,
those are the
that's
types
huge.
of things that we're looking for. Yeah, those are the types of things that in a lot of ways, if we were to get into this deep, AI could look at doing it and you would know where the map was, and you could do that. As a person who's sold that on a lot of places and understood how it works, I would want to make sure it was accurate and 100% accurate before we did it. I honestly still trust the agent more than I do sometimes the AI.
Yeah. Well, I know some of the AIs are still not, some of the issues that we see, like with ChatGPT, Bard, they're not up to date information. That's the real challenge,
Yeah.
right? Is keeping that information up to date. Well, and that makes me, I think we are kind of talking about one of the challenges of meeting the guest where they prefer, or let me rephrase that.
Mhm.
What are some of the challenges and opportunities of meeting the guests where they prefer? Because I think that's actually a better way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, the challenge is setting expectations. I learned that a long time ago. Setting the expectations of our availability in the contact center, our availability from an hours perspective, or it is. As soon as you put, a chat availability or do anything like that, you start to expand those hours. We don't run much longer than really the property hours, right? So we don't want to all of a sudden start staffing the contact center at 10 o'clock at night, at 11 o'clock
Sure.
at night, because somebody's like, oh, I want to chat with somebody right now. So setting that expectation, I learned that 100 years ago in a very large organization where we were inundated with calls on Monday, and we were open half a day on Saturday and not on Sunday. And we made the decision to open on Sunday and said, let's alleviate that Monday volume and open on Sunday. All of the end result was we added 15% to our volume. So we added more work. We didn't really diffuse the Monday problem, and because we didn't really understand what was going on and how it worked. And I think that's where I would say that we will be very cautious with what we do and how we do it and what we expand, because that is one of the risks, is that you set an expectation that is, because the expectation of all businesses now is that you're just always available when the guest or customer needs. And in our case, we try to compact it into the hours that we're actually operating. So.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And and I appreciate you saying that, because I think that a lot of times some of the challenges that we have is just not really understanding what the guests, we like to we talk about the guest on our side a lot, about the guest buyer's journey and what that looks like. And I think you're very right to understanding that, when they're there, that's when your team is there. Your team is always there when they're there, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and I think that's an important part of hospitality for a lot of attractions, is making sure that they're there. Is there any, like, you mentioned that you just keep those particular segments of your guest service to the hours that the parks are open or the resorts are available.
Mm-hmm.
What are the kinds of things that you're doing for that off time? 'Cause I'm sure
Yeah,
that
we
there
do.
is.
We for a couple of our, we partnered for a long time with two of our resorts, with a third party vendor to handle after hour calls. The hospitality world is don't let any call go unanswered, right?
Right.
I looked at it for a long time. We did a lot of reviews, and in one of our properties, we've inserted a voicemail option now after hours. So if somebody wants us to reach back out to them, we will do that, and we can reach right out to them. And it's the first thing we do in the morning when we get in. We set that expectation that, you'll get a call back between 8 and 9 in the morning, from one of our people. So that way we're still doing it. And we see right now about a 50% leave a voicemail. The other 50% don't. We then tracked the 50% that don't for about 3 weeks. We did this and found that they eventually called back. I kept saying it, as the person who wasn't in the hospitality world first. So my plans would change because your contact center wasn't open. I find that hard to believe. Especially since we're destinations, right? We're not Hilton. We're not competing with Marriott. If you want to go to Dreammore or Heartsong, you want to go to Dreammore or Heartsong.
Right.
That kind of piece was really the leverage of us putting that in place. And then we'll look at other opportunities where we can do that. We use a callback function now when we're busy so that people can get a callback, and that's gotten great feedback from the guests. When we go through our busy times, obviously at season pass renewal and those types of things that are a challenge. And as we go through that time period, we're very conscious of having that callback ability up so that you're not waiting on hold for a prolonged period of time. You're able to just do it, go on with your life, and then we call you back. That works.
Yeah, that's such good stuff. I think that so many of the attractions that might be watching today, they are facing these challenges. They don't know how to solve them. And an institution like Herschend, I think, has an advantage of someone like you who can help figure these things out. And I appreciate you sharing all of that information, because I know at least the brands that we work with, so many of them are still trying to figure out these challenges and how they can be successful at providing that guest service, and how to leverage technology to do that. One of the things that I want to talk about is remote service and how it's becoming increasingly common in the contact centers in the attractions industry. And it can be a challenge to provide real-time support for guests on property. And I think you have brought, in the last few, the last bit of our conversation, I think you have addressed how Herschend is addressing this challenge. Is there anything that you can add to that?
Yeah, when we talk about inserting a chat ability on an app to support people on property or to do those types of things, that's requires two pieces. It's not only the agent on our side understanding the answer they can give, but right, you always have to follow it to the next step. What happens when the agent doesn't know the answer, or they can't help somebody because it's really truly something that somebody needs support for on property? It's how do we back end that communication directly from my agent to somebody on property and get it there, and then do it. That's really the next challenge of how we get that direct path of communication back. So, if you ask me what holds us back from just flat out taking the chat option and putting it on the application, it's that gap. There's a gap. I'm a big believer in you can't put anything public facing till you've kind of thought about it in 360 degrees. And you said, okay, now we can do it and it's reasonably bulletproof, especially in that situation. All I do is frustrate somebody if they chat with me and I go, oh, you're going to need to look for a host on property. I can't help you with that. You know what? It'd be much easier if I could say, let me connect you with a host who's on property and you can meet them. That's the type of pieces. And we have the ability to do that with the technology we're using. We have the ability for an on-property host to get a request from us and then be able to be directed to that guest. So, and have that, and have our agents step out while they deal with it on property.
Yeah. Yeah. So really understanding what the guest journey is going to be like is an important part of a key factor and consideration for attraction businesses implementing these types of remote service models.
Yeah. It is. It goes remote too. We also have the challenge of, we're like everybody else. I can speak specifically to that, because we weren't ready in our resort world for the past couple of days, but Tennessee's had some weather issues. So, we are working diligently. We have the ability with our Silver Dollar City group and one of our other groups to work remotely and cover when the weather is. It doesn't happen right now. That'll be an evolution throughout we go this year, because that remoteness requires, the ability for that agent to be working in their home, but also then to electronically get to a leader to get them an answer or to get them an approval or to do the right thing. So we're putting all of those pieces in place so that we don't have any gaps when there's a weather concern or there's anything else. We have the ability to work from home when needed and work on property as well.
This is such good stuff. I really appreciate you sharing this, and I know that we're bumping up against time, but I have a couple more questions I need to ask
Go
you.
ahead.
I know that for Herschend Family Entertainment, creating memories worth repeating is part of the mission or the values, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I've heard that before, right?
Yeah, I think you've heard it. I think I hear it every day. So yes.
You hear it every day. Do I get it right? I
You
know I
got
was
it.
getting close. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for you, what does that mean to you? Creating memories worth repeating for guests. And I think for me, what I'd love to hear is, because you are on the technology side and you are working hand in hand with both guest services and the technology, what does that look like for you?
From our perspective, and especially in the contact center, one of the things we started to work on, and it's one of our programs going forth into 24 is we are really the first step in creating that memory, right? We help them, whether it's 3 weeks because they're just getting a pass and they're coming to Silver City, or it's 3 months ahead of time because they're booking a room at Dreammore and then they're coming to be at Dollywood. So we kind of contribute to that. And then how do we do that? And what does that work? We're very conscious at Herschend. One of the reasons I came to the organization was exactly that, as well as how we manage and work with our staff, understanding what's important. I've never worked in an organization where the average tenure for my agents is, approaching double-digit years. So, those agents have been around for a long time. They know everything they need to know, and they like being here. So, we just continue that process of making sure that the agent's aware their importance really on the journey of our guest.
Yeah, I love that. And, I'm curious, how does Herschend foster a culture of the guest centricity throughout its organization? Is that through its mission, or are there other things that are being done to help assist with that?
Yeah, it's absolutely through, we refer to it as leading with love. We do lead with love. I can tell you after 2 years, I've never seen a sign that there is not leading with love in the organization. So that means we're patient. I've always said for a long time in the contact center world specifically is the last thing you can do is be hard on your agents because they're the face of the organization. So as soon as you're, pushing them or doing anything else, then they're not going to take care of your customer, right? So we're very focused on it. They've always been focused on it here. This previous CEO, Joel Manby, wrote a great book about love works, and I'll be at a training next week where we talk about all of that, and we'll use kind of that annual reminder of this is why we're here, this is what our purpose is, and why we do what we do. So it's kind of full circle, and it's truly a top-down vision. It is, we do it here, and then any recognition I would get would be simply because they're recognizing that we're doing the right things for our employees, and that comes from not only our employees, but how do we extend that to our guests? That is a full view.
Well, I just think that is, I really love the idea of leading with love, right? I think that is an amazing way to set a culture in an organization that does, I've had my own personal experiences in different attractions where that's not part of the culture, right? Because of how you're being treated as a guest. And they don't know oftentimes that I work in this same industry as them. And I do think that is something that is unique to Herschend and what you all are doing over there and all the great work. And I mean, it's such a neat thing to see in our industry and to see in their team. and
We
people.
actively engage and encourage, especially even our agents, to make recommendations, to identify a situation with a guest and tell us and recognize them for that. That is, you can make the recommendation and it not go anywhere, but we appreciate the effort. So we will let
Right.
the employee know that. So
Yeah. But I think one of the biggest things in hospitality that I've learned over the years is that, people will spend their dollars with those that they know and trust. And when you're making recommendations and when you are showing your guests that you care about them and their experience and you value them and and even, paying attention, being aware of the investment they're making. We talk a lot about that investment and how, you want the customer to see the value or the guest to see the value, but also to um, you don't want them thinking about that investment, right? Because we know for
yeah.
a lot of people, it's hard. I know for my family growing up, my parents, I know it was difficult for us for them to get us to those parks.
Mhm.
And I know that that's the experience that so many families are having. And so when we as attractions, make the guests feel that they are appreciated and understood, I think that's one of the best things that we can do to add value to those experiences. And so I really love that. My last question for you is what is a memorable guest experience that you've witnessed firsthand at Herschend Entertainment, a family entertainment that, sticks with you? What's something that you can share with us that you might inspire somebody else out there
Yeah,
watching the show?
that's a great question. And there's a very recent example. Recent as about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Silver City, uh, you know, ended the long reign of Fire in the Hole, a ride that had been there since the early '70s, and it was really cool to be a part of kind of understanding what it meant, and then seeing the excitement that we were really replacing it with a new Fire in the Hole. So it's like it will continue on and what it does, but the ability for to see kind of how the guest received it, and specifically a guest that had actually ridden it when the ride opened in '71, and to have her back 52 years later riding that ride on the last day was really cool. That's the kind of a memory that we like to do. And in the end, it's not, you hit it, Sondra, when you said it's not easy for people to go to the attraction. It's not easy for them to go out. It's financially burdening. All of those things are difficult, especially in today's world, right? So what we're trying to do is make you not regret that, and make you not say, geez, that wasn't really worth me getting there. I would love to be able to say that would mean there would never be a line for a ride, that there would, everything would be the way they want it to be when they got there. It's really how we manage that and what we do that affects that real experience.
Well, I think that takes us kind of full circle to the expectation, setting the right expectations early on, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly right.
and you mentioned that, and that's awesome though. When you talk about memories worth repeating, having her come back all those years later,
Hmm.
that's such a cool story. I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that. That's one that'll stick with me for sure. Well, we're coming towards the end, and I apologize if I took up a little bit more of your time. I appreciate you being so generous with it and sharing all of this information with the audience that we have here that watch this show. And I think there's so much value in what you've given us today. So I appreciate that. And is there any final thoughts you want to leave for anybody? Is there anything out there that uh, would help someone maybe in your same role in a different industry that's just trying to figure it out? Is there anything that you can give in terms of a piece of advice?
Yeah, I think it's simple. It's no different than in my time of doing this. I haven't always been, I was a contact center person. I had to become a contact center technology person. So don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and say, hey, I don't really understand how this works, or why would you do that? And I'm open to that communication. If somebody has a question, I'll take the time and respond and answer, because that's how it learns, and honestly, that's how everybody's experience winds up a little bit better. So It's simple. I always joke and say, from my perspective, it's pretty simple because I've done this before, and I always like to say I already see it. I was here for 3 weeks and I already knew where we were going. We just had to kind of find our way as we went through for what was right and when the timing was right and how it would work. So, that's kind of the last piece is if you're trying to do this and find your way through, reach out to somebody who's done it before. I'd be happy to answer a question if somebody has one. Hey, what tool we'll stay away from what tools we use, but I can help you, give you some ideas. So.
Sure, I appreciate that. And on that note, if somebody wanted to reach you, what would be the best way to reach you?
They can
It's okay if you
find
say LinkedIn. That's the best place to reach me.
they can find me at LinkedIn. I actually will respond to them there. I jokingly say I would respond to you on LinkedIn unless I think you're trying to sell me something.
That's fair.
I already have a contact center software and CRM tool. So
yeah, no, that's totally fair. Well, I again appreciate you being on the show today. I think you gave us so many gems of wisdom that will definitely help other attractions trying to get to the level of expertise that you have. And I before we end the show, I just want to tell those of you watching that if you have questions like this, if there's something that's happening in your attraction or you're having challenges, one of the promises that I always give is that if I don't have the answers, I'm going to find people like Vincent who do, and we can have them on the show. We can have these conversations and really start figuring out how we can continue to improve the guest experience at all of our locations and continue to create memories worth repeating. I hope you don't mind if I say that, because I love that.
You can say it all day.
That's an important part of what we're doing here, being in the attraction space and watching smiles on families' faces and the memories that are being created. And I'm a firm believer that, just like myself, we are creating memories that are imprinting for lifetimes, and that was such a cool story about the woman who came back all those years later. So thank you for being on the show. And before we sign off, I just want to mention that if you would like to be on a guest on this show and you have something that you can add to our live audience to help them gain the skills and competencies that they need to be better at what they do, you can just scan this QR code here. There you go. I got it. Scan the QR code here and you can fill out a form, and we'd love to talk and have a chat with you about what's happening and all the amazing things that we know all of you are doing. Vincent, thank you so much for being my first guest of the year. This was a great conversation. I really loved everything that you brought up today. And we can sign off now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.